So this video will be my non-spoiler review for Spider-Man Across the Spider-Verse. So if you enjoyed this video today, feel free to like and subscribe for future Marvel content. Again, this is my non-spoiler review, so there will not be spoilers in this video. So the first thing I'll start out by saying, and I promise it's not a spoiler because it was known before the movie came out, but this is a part one to a two-part story. Originally, the two movies were called Spider-Man Across the Spider-Verse Part 1 and then Spider-Man Across the Spider-Verse Part 2, kind of like how Infinity War and Endgame were originally Infinity War Part 1 and then Infinity War Part 2. But Across the Spider-Verse Part 2 got changed to Beyond the Spider-Verse. So Beyond the Spider-Verse is set to release next year. So there is a cliffhanger at the end of this movie. So if you're someone who can't do cliffhangers for a long period of time, like how Infinity War to Endgame was or something like that, then it might benefit you to wait to watch this movie. Now, in terms of how the actual movie goes, it's visually spectacular as expected because they're truly honing the Spider-Verse style of animation that they had in the first movie, and they're just making it way better. There might be some parts where if you experience motion sickness very easily that you might get disoriented. There are parts that I didn't necessarily feel queasy while watching it, but there were some parts that visually kind of were uncomfortable to look at first, but I don't get motion sickness that easily, so if you do, it might be even worse for you. So there were a bunch of references to different versions of Spider People because there was way too many of them to keep track of. Obviously, the movie centers around like a main cast of characters. It's not like overloaded to the point where there's too many characters to focus on and stuff like that, but there are way more Spider People in this movie, just generally speaking. So the movie is a long movie. It's almost 2.5 hours, but unlike something like Infinity War where it's action and fast paced, this movie is heavily story driven. So there's a lot of build up happening, which makes the movie feel longer than it actually is at some points, which isn't a bad thing. I think the story build up and the expanding of the lore and the Spider-Verse in general was really, really well done. It's a really, really compelling story. So the main villain is a villain called Spot, which can basically make these black hole type portals, and he can like step through them and stuff like that. He's a way better villain than I was originally expecting from the trailers and stuff. I didn't really know how good of a villain he was going to be and like how that was going to, how they were going to approach it in the movie itself. But I do think Spot ends up being a very good villain, better than I was expecting. And although Spot is the villain, quote unquote, of the movie, Miguel O'Hara's Spider-Man 2099 is an antagonistic figure. And he's done fantastic as well. I would argue that Spider-Man 2099 is a lot more of an antagonistic. I wouldn't say villain. He's not like the main villain of the movie, but he is a very big antagonistic figure to Miles, and I would say he's in it a lot more than Spot is, even though Spot is the villain. So it's almost as if Spider-Man 2099 is the villain of the movie, even though he's not, but you'll wait and see that if you haven't seen the movie itself. So I would definitely say it's the number 2 Spider-Man movie for me so far right now, at least, because No Way Home is probably my number 1 Spider-Man movie because it just does it for me personally. It just does. And the fact that it's live action and stuff too, which is nothing against animation, but I just prefer more things in live action. Although, like I said, this movie looks gorgeous. It's just so well made. But I will say, even though I think it's the number 2 spot right now, that doesn't mean that it won't become the number 1 spot. I think that I would have to watch it again to truly solidify how I truly feel about it, but I definitely think it could easily be the number 1 movie after I watch it back. So this was already happening more and more from Spider-Man media over the years, but I definitely think with this movie, Miles Morales is like solidifying himself as a popular and incredibly well-written version of Spider-Man, so much so that I honestly think in a decade, I wouldn't be surprised if much more people prefer him over the original Peter Parker, because what they're doing with Miles Morales, not only in the Insomniac games, but in the Spider-Verse movies, and they actually just recently announced that there's going to be a live-action Miles Morales movie. Sony just announced it recently in some interview. I forget where it was. But Miles Morales is going to be way pop, and he deserves it. Like, the way they're writing him and everything that he's in is just absolutely fantastic. So, overall, like, there's just so much that could be said about the details of this movie that I'm obviously not going to get into. But it's at least a 9 out of 10. Like, at least. It could easily be more. Like I said, it could even be better than No Way Home for me personally, in my opinion. But I just need to go back and watch it again. So comment down below what you would rate into Across the Spider-Verse, I should say, if you've already seen it. And if you enjoyed this video today, feel free to like and subscribe for future Marvel content, and I appreciate you for watching the video.